had pinged people about doing that. I started providing feedback this week. I know, Sven, you said you were going to take a look at it too.
Yeah, I just gave some feedback in the PR. I think the doc's out of date.
Yeah, they're a little bit out of sync.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Thank you both and everyone for the reviews and comments. It's very helpful. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, we'll try and help you get that through, because it's obviously very important. Is Jacob on here or Sam?
Yeah, I'm here.
So we have the upgrade working group. Josh, you've somewhat been intimately involved in this. Do we want to do this now, or do we want to wait till next year?
I think we may. Probably next year would be I need to talk to Niraj about this.
Okay. Sam, Jacob, is that okay with you guys?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Shweta, is Shweta here? Shweta is not here. Was she on the invite? Let me check her calendar real quick. Sven, do you want to ping her just in case?
Yeah, I just did.
It's on her calendar.
Yeah, she's on the invite.
Okay. Well, we can come back to let's see. Give her a few minutes. Let's do the revision tag API discussion.
Yeah, I can take that.
Posted on the Slack file, but she's running a couple minutes late.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Sam.
All right. Would it be all right if I shared the screen?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll stop presenting for a second.
Thanks. Okay. Is this showing a diagram for everybody?
Yes, a small one, but yes.
Okay. Make it a little bigger. Okay, so pretty much, for those of you who don't know, this is the revision tag proposal, and pretty much the idea is shown in the diagram. The idea is you label namespaces, have them point to tags instead of directly to revisions, then you can point the tags wherever you want to. So the specific thing that I was asked to put this on the TOC calendar for is there's kind of a long discussion or debate about how these revision tags should be created and configured. So whether it should be like an imperative API through Istio control commands, or whether it should be a declarative API through Helm values and by extension the Istio operator. And I think there's merit to both sides there. And does anybody have any strong opinions on this?
So my first initial opinion is that the tags should not go, like, the mapping from a tag to a revision is a cluster-wide setting, and it shouldn't be on the revision itself, because then you can have conflicts, right? Like if three revisions claim the same tag, what happens? So it's better if it's declarative, it shouldn't be declarative on the revision, it should be declarative in the cluster.
Okay, so I guess that was another question, is if you wanted to make it declarative somewhere that's not a revision, not in like the Istio operator or part of the revision at install time, would you have to introduce a new CRD or like a new config map to store the association from tags to revisions? Or
yeah, so you need either a config map or a CRD.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out is that even if we configure the tags in the Istio operator, which is scoped for revision, it is by design not possible to have two revisions. A tag refer to two revisions because of how we store the tags. It's stored in a mutating webhook that's in the design based on the tag name. And so if we had two Istio operators both trying to claim the same tag, whatever the last one applied would win. There would not be somehow like a bad, we could never get into a bad state where a tag's pointing to two places at once.
With the current implementation. If we switch to the new implementation where we route injection through gateway or through smart proxy, then we'll have a completely different kind of forms.
Yeah, so that's like a third option there, is doing the traffic level stuff.
For long term, not short term. I mean, that's not something we can do in a release, but eventually I think we want to go there.
Yeah.
So purely from an API side, not from an implementation side. So John, I agree with you on the implementation. Yes, we can choose one, but from an API, it's better not to have that confusion if we can. And I think you can also, my other comment is that we can layer imperative on top. So I think if you have like either a CRD or a config map that is defining the mapping, right? You could have an imperative command that says, tag this revision with this tag, and then the effect of that is to go update that CRD or config map.
Right. Yeah. So today in this proposal, these tags exist just as webhooks, like John mentioned, and the imperative command would just go in and modify those webhooks. But I think one thing that John mentioned in his comments on the doc is that this would make life kind of hard for users who already have like Helm integrated into their CI/CD pipelines, and the Istio control commands would not integrate as well. Is that accurate, John?
Yeah, I would say that I think that there needs to be a way to configure this using Helm. I am 100% fine with also having an Istio cuddle command. And I think I'm starting to think that that is actually the right solution, because there's a lot of users, like if we have external Istio-D, like those users don't want to use Helm because it's all managed for them. So they're perfectly fine with running some imperative command, maybe. But other users who have just like a single cluster and they want to manage everything through their CI/CD pipelines with Helm, they stick to the labels there. And I think you have the best of both worlds if we offer both options.
I think it's also important to see where we'll be in 6 months or 9 months or long term. And having injection, everything go to a gateway, I think is non-controversial, because that gives us the maximum flexibility. We can do it per workload. We have a lot of benefits with that. Having a command that is doing more than just applying the label, that is just checking telemetry, doing gradual rollout, and doing kind of orchestrating the switch. It's also something that is very useful and very important to have at some point. So the API should be able to tolerate it, to kind of move to future, basically, so we don't have to reinvent everything.
So how do you see the revision tags as they are in this proposal fitting in with that future where you have like, you're proxying the injection URL?
If we proxy, then it's we are back into networking space. I mean, you have you have a host name, you can match attributes of the caller, and then you route and you do whatever you want with virtual service. You can do 20% of workloads go to the new revision, and then you can say that. So we already have APIs for that. We don't have to do anything. Once we have this in place, we have a gateway in place, we can use our existing APIs to control revisions just like for everything else.
Yeah, so just using
Costin,
virtual service and destination rule and gateway to config percentage to shift. Sorry, Mitch.
That's all right. I'm just wondering, Costin, in that world where you're talking about a control plane operator really managing the shift between versions of a control plane, is there any role for a application operator driving a switch between control planes?
Application operators should never be involved in this, because application operators are not operating.
Mesh admin, the mesh admin.
Yeah, mesh admin is the right role.
And I think the answer is yes.
Okay,
the mesh
so is there a continued role for the mesh admin then, or is that only on the control plane side?
No, the mesh admin should have a role here too.
I think a mesh admin with a hat of operator maybe, or something, because I don't think the mesh admin should have, because IBM, Google, and so on managing this control plane, may do it independent of the mesh admin.
Well, I think we need to separate those two, right? So there might be two levels here. So the operator of the control plane, the control plane operator might be making a change to some particular managed control plane, right? They're updating it or whatever. But separately, the mesh admin may be rolling out a change to their mesh that they do through a canary of changing revisions, right? So I think
for their own application, yeah.
Yeah.
for their own, like, let's say they're rolling out a new telemetry provider.
Yes.
I don't, right. They're making some change, they need a canary. So I think we actually want both levels.
True. Agreed.
Yeah.
But we should not mix, the rollout of a new control plane configuration with the revision of individual, CRDs, because that's very important, and we definitely need to discuss and address this second part. But I would not mix it with restarting Istio basically and doing the.
Yeah, I'm happy to see both of those live side by side. I just wanted to make sure you were envisioning both of them together, not either or.
Yeah, and also together with what they do for their own application, because virtual service and traffic shifting is a first-class feature in Istio. I mean, they will do it for their own app when they roll out new version of their own app. It's no different.
So what are the next steps here on this, Sam?
Yeah, so if I understood correctly, I think I'm going to move forward with an imperative Istio control command that deals with mutating webhooks.
So and then if someone wanted to control that via CI/CD, could they like just control the webhook directly, or how would they do that?
So you would not create the webhook directly yourself. You would use an Istio control command.
Right, but if they want it to be, so I'm a little worried about
compatible with the Helm like declarative way of doing things is what you're saying.
So I'm saying I don't think that the declarative place for this is on each revision. I think this has to be per cluster, right? This is a global cluster setting, the mapping. It's not a revision setting. And
right,
so
yeah.
I would prefer having some, just a config map start maybe, but some resource that they can control via CI/CD that does the mapping, and then Istio Cuddle is just mutating that.
And then I agree with you. Today, in 1.8, they already have a resource that they control, which is a mutating webhook. And right. Istio Cuddle is actually just going to change this mutating in a controlled way. But we can introduce another one. But if we have one already that can be modified by CI/CD system, why do we need one?
That's what I'm thinking, right? Like, do we need that indirection, or should we be mutating it directly? I don't actually think the user should mutate that directly, just because it seems
because of permissions and the risks. Yes, I agree with you.
We do already have global resources, like the validating webhook. There's one in the cluster, and it's controlled by Helm. So if we are going to stop using Helm as the way to configure those, then I think we should be consistent. And I'm not sure that there's any alternatives for someone that's deeply integrated with Helm. I think they want to use Helm to configure everything, and I'm not sure why these would be any different.
Remember, Helm 3 is taking a very strong stance against doing global stuff or cluster level stuff. I mean, they don't even allow you to put labels on namespaces or touch namespaces. So I would say that if we follow the philosophy of Helm, we would treat cluster-wide resources separately. And
I don't think Helm is telling you not to use Helm for cluster-wide resources.
I think the best practice is to run Helm as a namespace operator, not as a cloud, but maybe.
If the custom resource didn't have a whole list, but just had the pointer for that namespace that it was in, then it would work well with kubectl get and things like that produce nice custom lists. If you put a whole list in a single CRD, it's hard to display that list with kubectl.
Yeah, the concern I have with making a CRD is that something has to turn the CRD into a webhook. Like that's the only thing that really matters at the end of the day is the webhook. So what is going to turn the CRD into the webhook? Either the user now has to manage multiple different CRDs they pass to Istio Cuddle. We need to have an in-cluster controller that has root privileges to modify webhooks. It seems like a very big challenge just to move a setting out of the values.yaml when we're already configuring similar things there.
Which will go away if we do gateway, because with gateway you don't have to do any change webhook. There's one webhook to rule them all, you don't touch it ever.
Well, so So maybe a compromise here is we start with the imperative command, have it just mutate the webhook, and then see if users need us to give them more declarative control, and then we can debate whether we add that through a separate thing or directly on Istio operator spec or somewhere else, or in Helm values.
Or gateway, which again, I think that's the most, and it's not so hard really.
So gateway, I think there's
I
think that's very tricky. That would need its own design. I'm not convinced that it's feasible. But Sven, I mostly agree with you, but one concern I have is that we have an existing bug in install where the validating webhook is completely broken if you use revisions, because it points to the old Istio D name. So we need some way to, this was the origin of why we wanted to do this, right? We need some way to fix that problem, and I don't think that way can be a separate command. Like the install of revision should work with just using Helm. Maybe the additional tags are not, and we just provide some subset of it. But we need some way to declare something as the default revision so that it controls the webhook.
Yes, I agree. I think it's, yeah, it's interesting. Like I could see us adding this to the install command, but it doesn't, it's not in the Istio operator spec, but it's like a flag to the install command or something, and there's a default. I'm just more worried about having the state be that the user has like 5 different Istio operator specs that all say default, and then it's just whichever one they happen to have done last is the one that wins.
Yeah, I think that's what it would be if we like just kind of put it in the operator and then had it generate a new webhook, as part of like the install. That's pretty much one of the problems, is that you could go back and forth on like it's whichever one was installed last for a given tag would be the one the tag points to, and it's kind of confusing semantics, I think.
That's reality today. I mean, if you apply Helm to charts, and they said the same thing.
Right, but let's say if you install like revision A and it has tag prod and canary, and then you install revision B and it has prod and canary, you just like override both of them, or if you overwrite ones that you might not have intended to overwrite.
I think we should probably table this discussion and come back to it where are we doing this? Is this in environments that we're discussing this?
Mostly under environments.
And then upgrade.
Because I think we do need this to define exactly what is the API here. The CLI API.
And that was a process, Sven, because I'm not entirely sure you want to deploy a new revision and say that it's automatically default. It's
right.
kind of
yeah.
the purpose.
All those details are what I want us to discuss, not right now.
Yep.
We have a bunch of other stuff on the agenda.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. We can take this offline. And
are these options explored in the doc thoroughly?
Yeah, so there's a whole section called "Where should we put these revision tag things?" that talks about this. But,
okay. All right. So the ask right now is for the TOC members to go read the doc and form opinions. Okay.
Yeah. So my thought on this is that the Istio control, like the imperative API, and I'll say this really quickly. The API there, like what the command would look like, wouldn't really change. Like what a user would do wouldn't change. Maybe the backing, if it's like a config map or a mutating webhook directly, that might change implementation-wise. So it's pretty low commitment to put an experimental Istio control command and let users start using the revision tags, as opposed to adding something to the Istio operator, which is more official, high commitment, requires API review and that kind of thing. So that's what I was thinking.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Let me present again. Shweta here?
Yeah, I'm here, Louis.
Okay. You want to talk about the automated doc testing proposal?
Sure.
I can probably present that.
All right. So I think this may not be a news or surprise to everyone here, the testing we go through and the challenges we go through during every release. There's small modifications which we did was to improve on the testing sheet, remove some of the confusions. The current stats of the test cases which exist today is altogether approximately 150 or around 200. The P0s are 65 out of all of those. Now the challenge, the biggest challenge which happens during the releases is only small percentage of that is automated, right? It's very hard to get the manual testing done. It's hard to get the ownership. I mean, it takes some time. The P1 or P2, to be honest, never gets tested because we don't have time. So all we rely on is the manual testing, most of the manual testing on P0 bugs. And then, it's a constant struggle in every release. Sometimes we have to delay the releases, because of which we also had plans where, the testing was done. There were some issues were found, whether upgrade, downgrade, or others where we had to delay the release because of the fix we had to work on. So these are some of the challenges. The other challenge was, it took some time to make sure we review the prioritization of the test cases, which also takes time. However, the mitigation for that is, start early on, which is fine, but, getting the ownership and not having automation is a problem. So if you go a little bit down in the doc.
Sorry.
No worries. So the proposal here is, one is the short term and another is the long term. Short term is, have the prioritization of these docs testing review 6 weeks in advance, versus what we do today is only 3 weeks in advance, which becomes so close to the testing days, and we get panic at that point. There's another thing which, Lynn suggested, that the prioritization of the ownership is listed in that. So pick up some of them as a default so they can help us review. And then there was third one, which Josh suggested, rather than having 2 sheets, just use 1 sheet. So it reduces the contentions of, having multiple sheets and figure out, who is doing what kind of testing. However, in the long run, the suggestion here is, because, we are not automating, and every time there is a struggle with the manual testing, is for each working group, for each release, pick top 3 to 4 test cases and get it automated each release. Having said that, we have around 7 to 8 working groups, but we are only considering 5 working group here. We are leaving docs, TNR, and the product security working group here, right? With that math, we should be able to cover all the test cases, whether it's P0, P1, or P2 priority, in a year and a half. However, the only caveat is we are not adding any more manual test cases, or if a new feature gets added, all the docs test cases should be automated as a criteria to have it promoted to alpha or whichever state it is in. So it's a proposal, short term, long term, is to take some of those test cases, get it automated, because it's really getting tricky to get it, community testing every release.
So a fairly basic question, right? I mean, we've put a lot of effort into the docs testing framework at this point. How hard is it to do the automation?
The Swiss.
So the alternative plan is, right, we just say, look, all P0 and P1 docs must be automated.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and it's a goal for the release, and we would block the release on not having achieved it.
Louis, for a simple doc, the bar is not terribly high for writing an automated test. There are some of our docs historically involving multi-cluster and things like that were a little bit more involved and difficult, but I think a lot of that's been cleaned up.
Yeah, that's what I thought, right? That we had made a lot of progress on some of the more difficult scenarios. The install experience is easier. The configuration experience is more lean. We actually have functional tests that cover, right? So the options would be, right, either you have a test that's for the doc, or there's a test that already exists that substantially covers what the doc says, but doesn't line for line follow the doc, right? But it can be manually reviewed without having to be manually tested, right? Because the test is effectively testing the same thing, and so we just link to a test. And then the third case that John mentioned, which is the doc that's effectively untestable and it's just marked, right? As, you know, the doc requires manual review before the release to make sure that it's still sane, and possibly is also linked, right? Because if we're documenting some feature, even if the doc itself is not testable, there's probably a test for the feature in essence, right? That would be a way to get, right, coverage without, well, it's a little bit more blunt, right? So what do other TOC members think?
You're basically saying accelerate the long-term plan rather than trying to do this over the next year and a half. Do it in the next release, 1.9 or 1.10?
Right. So let's stop having toil.
With respect, the 1.9 roadmaps are already written. The ship has sailed as far as the 1.9 development cycle goes.
Well, testing is always baked into the plan.
Right. So if
have individual tests for the docs.
yeah, so basically, if you have any feature that needs to be promotion to alpha or even beta, I believe it's required to have automation for in Istio.io. I mean, I recently went through this myself with external control plane as well. So there's no exception. So if you have any in the roadmap that's marked as part of the promotion, this will be part of it, basically.
So one of the things I suggested was the ability to link a doc to a test as opposed to requiring the doc to use the new test framework as a way to at least get some notion of coverage into the doc based on existing work. Right? Because if you can't link the doc to a test, right, that's testing the same effective feature, right, then there's clearly a problem. Right, that's kind of an intermediate way to get coverage.
Yeah, agreed, but it could be getting a little bit dangerous because they may be testing different things. So
Well,
unless
right, then you have to, like, there has to be a manual review, right, which says, okay, here's the doc and here's the test. Like, do they agree? If they don't agree, then it's not a valid association, right? So somebody should review that. But it doesn't mean you have to go and, if the test is passing and you've done the review, which should be quick, right? It's an inspection, then maybe we consider that at least partial coverage.
yeah, we'll have to use a different tag to flag that because today there's a like checkbox and a cross indicate not tested. We have to like partially tested maybe.
Right. It's like, and Brian, to your point, right? It's clearly not full coverage. It would be considered partial coverage, but it's clearly better than nothing.
Better than nothing for sure, yeah.
And it's something we could do quite cheaply, I think.
It would at least help us prioritize which things to work on, right? The things that have nothing would be higher priority than the things that have something.
Right. They could go from P0s to P1s, right? And if there are things that have nothing, then they're still P0s, right?
Yeah.
It gives us a way. And you know, maybe the correspondence between the test, well, like nothing's going to be as good as a literal docs test, right? So that's 100% coverage. But we could make an assessment of how good a job the test does at covering what's in the doc. And you could probably provide an indicator of quality there. And that would be pretty.
I was going to say one thing then we could say we do for 1.9 is go through the P0s, link, so either test, add an automated test, or link to an existing test for every single one.
Or our set of tests, right?
Set of tests. And then see where we're
Yeah, totally. I was thinking, gosh, maybe there could be, like we discussed, a feature, how long can they stay for alpha? Maybe for the doc, it's the same thing. How long can the page stay untested? And then if they pass that window, they either needs to seek an exception or the page will just be removed.
So does that, the folks who have been working on docs automation testing, this idea of linking as to existing tests as a form of an intermediate indication of coverage, is that something that you guys, who considers themselves the owner for that currently?
Nobody. That's part of the problem.
Maybe somebody who's already on vacation.
Sridhar.
Where's Shweta?
Sridhar.
Sridhar.
Oh, Sriram. He owns it. That's his responsibility.
Yes, exactly. So obviously this should come up in BTR. But let's make a note of it, and let's try find an owner following up offline. Shweta, does that? I think that's helpful, right? Because it does help us correspond existing investment with the qualification process, so we can make a more nuanced assessment of priorities. Which would obviously help with shortening the time to qualify. The ask for working group leads would be to then go through and make a choice about what, right, the baseline. So we could say the baseline is like every doc has to either be linked to a test, have a test, or if it has none of those things, then it has to be manually qualified for the release. And if it's basically P0s, anything that's marked P0 has to be manually qualified if it's got a gap, right? Because obviously if you have a test, you're no longer P0. And then we could say, look, you must do either of those two things for the 1.9 release. Linking to test should be quite cheap, right? I don't think that would be overly onerous. Like, it's less work than actually doing the manual qualification. So I don't think there should be any objection to that within the current 1.9 planning. Mitch, you raised that issue. Does that sound okay to you?
For issues with for features which have existing tests, linking to those existing tests should be a very low bar. As far as going back and covering the back catalog where there are misses, that might be a little bit more challenging.
Sure. Like, if there's a doc and we can't link to a test that we think reasonably validates what's in the doc, right, then it stays in the current state, right, and it stays as a P0.
Yeah, I think that sounds fair.
Okay.
I like that.
All right.
I would also go as far as to say, I mean, there's like concepts and stuff that we've had trouble figuring out how to test because it's just a single YAML argument or whatever. There's nothing to test there, and this kind of reinforces some of that with partial testing as well. So it expands on not just doc test, but adds that.
Yeah, I think the point a few different people are making is that, clearly this is not good enough, right? This is just a first step. This does not mean that the doc is correct and that the doc actually works. It just means that we have better than nothing. And so I think we would keep a catalog of these, right? And the next step after it in 1.10 would be to go through and actually make sure we're automating the rest of it. Josh, you've been quiet. Do you have any thoughts?
Not really.
Eric has raised a point in the messages.
I think that
Yeah,
was
it's
what I
not
was
much
just,
different than what Brian was saying, but I mean, it's just that we, linking to a test doesn't mean that we've actually tested the doc.
Right. So yeah, the tests have to have reasonably good correspondence, right, with what's in the doc. Right. If they don't have reasonably good correspondence, or like that, so I think the point is, like, working group leads should make the assessment about whether the test, that association between the doc and the test is valid or not, right? Is it providing some coverage for what's described in the doc, and maybe an indication of what or how much coverage that is? Clearly, it's not 100%.
Yeah, and we have to enhance the framework to have this partial passing status as well, and also the UI to be able to reflect that correctly.
I think we can just do this in the spreadsheet as we're tracking. Like, I don't think we need to actually surface this. I actually wouldn't want to.
Oh, so not surface to our user? Because today they are on each of the documentation page, which shows to the user, are they tested?
I would not count this as tested.
Okay, got you. Okay, it's just for our own community test. Sorry, I missed that context.
Oh, that's my.
Right. I mean, maybe we could incrementally improve it, but yeah, the first step is to just let's get our toil under control. The second step would be just make decisions about indicating the quality of coverage. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay.
We have 17 minutes. That's a time check. We should keep going through Shweta's as items. And Louis, if you want to go back and present the other tab.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was trying to take some notes.
Okay, so while you're taking notes, I'll go to the next one. So it has happened in the past that, when we did the release announcement, either we forget to announce on one platform or, sometimes on Twitter or some other. So there was some discussion in the working group leads meeting if we can use any app to push the announcement on all these social media platforms. Would you be okay with that idea? And should we invest some time to figure out those kind of apps as a single way of pushing to all the social media platforms where we want to announce?
It almost sounds like a steering question to me, less than TOC.
I mean, if there's such an app, I would like to know. So when we write a blog, I don't have to do like 3 things.
I mean, there were, I think, at least 1 or 2 people have suggested, but I wanted to bring it here so that, we can see if there is any concerns.
I don't have any technical concerns with that.
Yeah,
idea.
me either.
I think we should try to bring it up in the steering meeting as well, just to see if there's any concerns from steering on that. But, and also if there's anyone in steering that wants to take it on that are not members of TOC.
I suspect Craig might be willing, or
yeah, those were the ones I was thinking.
Yeah, Shweta, Brian just sent buffer.com. You might want to look into that.
Yeah, if anybody wants to drop options into the notes as suggestions, please fire away.
Yeah, like once we have the recommendation or agreement, then we can look on more than one owner, because I think it would be helpful to have so that one person is not a bottleneck. I think then we can go into the next step of who can be the owner of this. So
does the LinkedIn topic relate to this as well, Shweta, or is that separate?
So that is, I was about to say, following up on the same, there was another question, can we have a Istio LinkedIn account? It does not exist today. I also like the idea because there are many platforms where we do the announcement, but LinkedIn is not there unless we are not aware. At least I am not aware. So the question, is it okay to have a LinkedIn account or Istio?
Does Kubernetes have a LinkedIn account?
That's a good question. I do not know.
Because I feel like LinkedIn is more for like people. I could be wrong, but just so you guys know, there is a Istio group in LinkedIn. I'm actually one of the admins. So occasionally people would pin me to join that group. And I've seen people like Solo publish a lot of stuff on that group. So that's a group for people to publish things that's related to Istio. So that might be what you are looking for instead of like an official account.
Mm.
And I'm gonna replicate your comment here about steering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me I'm gonna start with Craig as our social media.
Yeah, let's tag Craig on both of those.
Ram as well.
I don't think you can do add. Oh, it worked. Never mind.
It worked. Yeah, surprisingly.
I just have to remember the email addresses properly. Keep going.
Okay. Then there was a reminder. As far as I know, all the working group leads have done it. But the last reminder, if you have not updated the features which are completed and has mentioned in the Istio 2020 roadmap, please go ahead and do it by next week, because I'm going to take the spillover from the features which are not done to start working on the 2021 roadmap. So one thing for sure, what we have not done in the past as a good job is when we built the Istio 2020 roadmap early this year, we have not reviewed it every quarter once the release is done, how many features were done, what is left behind. So literally what we are doing is the retro of the roadmap at the end of the year, which kind of helpful, but not so much. So we're expecting that once the 2021 roadmap is ready, with the help of all the working group and the TOC members, then we can review it every quarter so that it has some agility and we can mark and then have even the promotional of the features visibility, whether they're promoted, not promoted in a single place.
Okay. I don't think we're going to review the roadmaps in this meeting. So this was just ask for follow-up, right, Trina?
Yeah, like working group leads have been doing that. Many of them have already, completed their task. Just in case if anybody is left, then please complete by next week. And I've already started working on 2021 roadmap, draft at least.
Or not next week because you're on vacation and early January. Just
yeah.
Okay. So we had the tag discussion. Jason, do you want me to present the Protobuf API feature status and you can talk about it?
Yeah, sure. That would be great. Glad to be the last design review for 2020. Yeah. So this has been reviewed in UX. So just want to go here is to kind of get agreement with the TLC, since TLC members are mostly API owners, so they involve API changes. So objective of this is, so we have been focusing on presenting feature status for users, and there has been work in annotations and also will be work in environment variables. So this design is focusing on the Protobufs APIs that users use to configure. So there are a few things that we have considered the usage of this kind of feature status on Protos. One is kind of showing deprecated alpha early stage API status for users when they actually use such API and notify them in the Istio Cuddle tool, like Analyze or even there's a like extra tool doing that. And also more importantly on the upgrade case where users upgrade between Istio versions, and they have a way to know that we're what configuration they need to change. So for the design for Proto, so there are some designs below that will be shared with all other configurations, but design particularly for Proto itself is to use the custom options as the way to label these Proto fields. So we use the names we can change, but right now I'm recommending like using Istio feature status for showing the status like alpha, beta, stable, and we mentioned below we will add a dev for just experimental features, and also we'll add an Istio feature name. So this name is a link to the actual feature that this field is linked to, and we'll activate the feature. So it is a better way for user to know like what features they're actually using and what status of that is. Something to note is that I think the status here we're labeling is only on the field level, so it's not on the feature itself level. So it's important to kind of differentiate between the field level status and also the actual feature status. The feature status will be the actual feature status will be tracked in the feature list which we'll talk below. There are a few rules I would like to kind of note here is that individual status level will always, field level status will always override message level status. So API owner developer can label the status on the message level. So for example, if they label on object meta level here, then for example, they label it alpha, then it means the labels and annotations will be inheriting that. Quick question from Costin: does that feature status replace hide from doc? I actually don't know from hide from doc means right now. It may mean different things. It mean deprecated. It may mean retired or something, like we totally remove that field.
Not showing up in the public docs, that's what I mean, because normally we want to publish docs for the beta and supported features.
Yeah, so I think that's a separate discussion where after we introduce this, so how we gonna handle doc kind of presentation based on these annotations, right? So yeah. And yeah, so the same for enums, the same thing. And also, and right now I'm thinking only one feature status can be provided for each field, and one feature name can be provided for each field. And going on for feature catalog, so that's the list of features that kind of I've mentioned about. So in Istio.io, we have a list of features that for feature status, but it's not like something that we actively track or actually consume programmatically. The test framework has a existing list of features and something that we can actually build on. I think the list is still growing, but I think it's a expandable framework. So basically, I think we want to build on top of that, and potentially in the future, not just for feature status, we will have like other tooling like docs, and testing, and client tooling all use that feature list to present information.
Has everybody seen the feature status list? I just presented it real quick. I'll switch back to the other one. There's this ontology of features. Right, that's the one that you're referring to, Jason.
Yeah, exactly.
That is my ideal. I want to homeschool them and then.
Okay, I'll come back to this. Okay.
And regarding the feature status names, I think after feedback on the UX working group, so for the feature status, we'll have alpha, beta, stable, and we added dev, and then I'm proposing to add a lifecycle kind of name, label to the feature status as well. Like basically, it describes deprecated or retired, so they can be annotated in parallel, and so meaning like maybe a beta field can also be deprecated or retired in the future. So in protobufs, so the feature lifecycle, the deprecated and retired can be kind of shown as like they have native deprecation annotation, and also retired being like reserved field can be as the retired field. Just going on for the client tooling, I think here are a few things that I think we will work on or potentially have impact on the client tooling, kind of using analyzers to show like feature status and notify there's an alpha or deprecated field, and docs can potentially use this. I think in sake of time, I would like to go to the timeline and probably ask for the TOC member. So basically, I think for 1.9 release, I know we're close, but we want to get this out as soon as possible. So I think the first state we kind of want to do is to kind of use the existing APIs and label the feature status. The feature status meaning like alpha, beta, and stable, and then also label like deprecated, kind of retired, basically like kind of a cleanup of our APIs. And I would like to work with the working group leads, working groups to on that. And then we provide in 1.9 we provide a client tooling, maybe that's an analyze to kind of just notify users of these alpha and deprecated fields. And in 1.10 and onwards, it will focus more on kind of associated features and also focus on like upgrade cases. Like upgrade cases are more complicated than just showing pure feature status, as they need to know the state between each release and present that diffs to the user. So that's the goal, and that's a kind of a larger scope. I think will probably worth to look at in 1.10 plus. So as for the TOC here, I think it will be to kind of probably approve this doc. I list Lynn on the doc, but anyone interested, feel free to put your names on there. And also, I think as I work with work group leads and also push out like PRs for the API changes, just let you know that this is happening. Thoughts, feedback?
So one question I have, Jason, obviously we don't actually need to couple this work with releases, right? We could make incremental improvements to this in point releases because it doesn't actually change any behavior in the product.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. I think the goal here is to just because the earlier the better, and user will be able to use this.
Yeah, so maybe just capture that in the phasing so you could make it clear. We don't actually have to be tied to 1.9 and 1.10 are just dates really, or like if we ship some of this in 1.9.3, that would be fine, right?
Yeah, but Louis, back to your point about deprecation and retired feeds, I assume these are tied to the release, right? Because these are the things people can remember for a given release. These are gone.
Right, but we should just be capturing the state, right?
Yeah, a change in state requires a minor version increment, but simply documenting the state, going from nil to our first state should not.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I think this looks really good. I just have a quick question on the first bullet, label field feature status of existing fields in the API. Is there a procedure for that? Do you envision to go through like the Brian Avery's checklist for that for beta, or is there a fast pass process for that?
I'm not sure about the list, but the work I'm imagining is just to work with the individual working groups leads, and then kind of make them check if that's something that agree on and they intend to have the status.
Okay, I would assume the work group lead would also look at the checklist to see, based on how they feel, if
you can maybe, or can Brian, or you probably kind of comment on the list, so I don't know, like I will take that into consideration.
Jason, I had a question about the feature So I think the status makes perfect sense. I was amazed that this wasn't actually already a thing. But the features, if we have one feature per field, it seems like it's very limiting. Like there's some fields like a virtual service host.
Yeah.
Like that applies to like every feature almost, you know? And then there's other ones where it's kind of just like redundant, like the telemetry field of some API probably is the telemetry feature. Like it seems almost redundant. So I don't know if I have a better solution, but it seems like it may get us into trouble there.
Yeah, so I think for the initial release, I think we want to do probably a minimal one that with like less confusing ones, and then because this is expandable, so as we kind of go on, I think ideas might be like we can link multiple features to a field or something.
Yeah, I mean the feature catalog right now is a hierarchy, right? It obviously needs work, right?
Yeah.
Probably take a couple of passes to make it useful. Right now, it's an internal only thing, anyways, for testing.
Yeah, so that's why I think I mentioned in 1.10 plus. So that definitely needs more work, kind of collaborating with feature list and yeah.
But we can iterate on this without
Yeah, exactly.
a lot of implication, right?
Yeah, and imagine there will be more like design docs based on that. So it's just the initial kind of proposal.
Yeah, I think this is great. So thanks, Jason.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I'm done.
All righty, everybody. We are done. See you all in the new year, and congratulations on everything that you've done in 2020. There's a lot of stuff happened this last year. I went over the release notes and everything that shipped. I actually did we did an internal presentation on it yesterday. It's a long list of big stuff. It was pretty impressive. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you for the hard work, and Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays. See you in the new year.
Yeah,
Thanks,
take
you
care.
too.
Thank you.